Hey guys, and for my returners, welcome back to another video, and for the new people, hope you like Skyrim mods, because today is the top 10 magic mods of 2025, at least so far as we get close to the halfway mark for this year, and it has been pretty crazy. And you're probably looking at the length of this video and realizing that it is almost 20 minutes long, and I'll just say, because this is 10 magic mods and not just 10 random mods, they take a lot to showcase because most of these are more than just 10 spells. So without further ado, make sure to hit that like button down below and don't forget to endorse mod authors. And let's dive right in. All mods will be down in the description, and I hope you guys enjoy. At the number 10 spot, we have a remaster for a very popular mod. This mod is called V.A.E.R. And as you can see by the title, it stands for Visual Animated Enchants Reborn, because this is a remaster of an older mod, adding new enchantment effects to every enchantment type inside of Skyrim, and mainly vanilla. If you use something like Summer Mist, there is a patch for it on the mod page, but this mod already covers almost all vanilla type enchantments, and it even goes so far as to give the named or unique weapons special effects. And these said special effects definitely have them standing above the rest in terms of how amazing the new graphics look, but that does not mean the other enchantments sag far behind. They all have their own custom ENB glow effect attached to the weapon, as well as new animated effects. Some of the enchantment effects definitely are more apparent than some other ones, like some will just have a slow moving glow effect, while others will have effects shooting off from them. Mainly the named artifacts like mentioned before, but there are some normal enchantments that will have this same effect. And it is especially apparent if you play in first person, but it shouldn't overwhelm you. And I do want to point out these aren't in the order of which ones are better, just which ones I enjoyed more. But up next at number 9, we have another mod that I kind of missed before. This mod is called Shadow Clone on Self. This mod adds a simple spell to your game that will pretty much always be useful because it clones you. And it's like Naruto shadow clones, but the ones that were infused with wood, which were much more useful if you get the reference. This clone will copy your armor and its stats, as well as all of everything that you have currently equipped, including your weapon. So if you're currently using magic instead of just a normal weapon, it will use that same magic, which makes for a perfect secondary output, or if you prefer not to use followers. But be careful, if it matches your stats and you run out of magicka because you have a good magicka spell equipped, it will instead just start punching things like Batman, or you can just recast it with the new weapon out and it will come out full health, ready to kill more things. The best part about this mod though is that it activates like a shout so that you don't take up slots. Up next, we all know the mod Strange Ruins, but do you know about the remastered visuals of Alternate Ruins? Adding in dozens of new spell variants that are animated and compatible with all new spell mods. And when I say spell variants, I don't mean it adds new spells to your games. It just overhauls Strange Ruins and the ruins that go to spells. You guys asked me about Strange Ruins, but most of you never asked about these new ruins, so I assume you downloaded the old mod and didn't get this, so you thought you were probably disappointed. But here we are with Alternate Strange Ruin. This mod adds in a total of 34 new ruins based on the mod page, but it definitely feels like more because you more than likely won't see the same ones unless you're using the same spells, because it just replaces the ones in the base mod. The ruins usually only appear when casting a spell, but in the MCM of Strange Ruins I turned it to permanent. No matter if I'm stationary or currently casting, the ruins will appear, so I can always see these amazing new textures. But that also means you'll get to see NPCs using these as well, just in case you don't use magic on your current character. It makes it so that you can get the full of this mod. And I would technically rank this one higher because this has been an instant download for me since it first came out, but I based it on usefulness and fun with it. And this is just an instant install and forget. Up next, a rework for a Daedric artifact that a lot of people end up needing by in-game, and that just happens to be the SpellBreaker. And this mod is simply called SpellBreaker Rework. And this rework is kind of complicated, but it really expands on the shield. Aside from just adding a new aesthetic, the gameplay of it has been completely changed. The enchantment has been completely changed. Now there is a new effect called a Tonal Ward that will absorb magicka over time, but as it absorbs it, it will also lower regeneration of nearby enemies, negate spell damage overall, and also increase your armor accordingly. Kind of making this a little overpowered now that I'm thinking about it. But what's great about this is that with this tonal energy, you can also release it in the form of new skills that you get as soon as you equip the shield. You can either bash to release new spells, or you can activate the power. The damage of the spells aren't very high, but it does make fighting dragons a lot easier because now you can negate their dragon breath and release it right back at them in the form of tonal energy. Or maybe you prefer to just look cool with a lot of effects surrounding your character. Up next, a mod that most of you probably forgot about, even though it adds a massive giant fire tornado. But this mod is called Elemental Mastery Magic by Kittytail, adding 4 master level spells to your game that all have their own usefulness, but mostly all of them do some type of damage with their own effect and elemental effect. This mod offers a master level spell for each element in Skyrim, so fire as you're currently seeing, but there's also shock and frost. And the last one, I honestly have no idea what element it would belong to, but maybe it's what happened when you combine all 3 of the main ones. This mod also comes with Spid when you first install it, but if you don't use Spid, nothing will break. You just won't get to see high level enemies using these cool spells. And if you want to obtain the spells yourself, you can find the tomes on their body after you kill them, or you could just visit a vendor if you want to be a pacifist, but they have to sell master level spells or else you're just wasting your time. One of the coolest spells of the pack is definitely the supercharged sprites. It creates 3 shock sprites that fire lightning at enemies, and they deal damage to both health and magicka, usually around 120 damage based on the mod page, but it can scale like you're seeing in the video and pretty much obliterate enemies. But the reason why I said it's cool is because they act as kind of followers, so enemies will attack them instead of attacking you. But like I said, this last spell, I'm not entirely sure where it would belong. I'm guessing it combines all 3 of the elements and just combines them, which would make sense considering the name is Chaos Furnace. It does initial impact damage, and then it does damage over time for enemies still in range. To the Hall of the Vigilant for probably the smallest mod of this video. This mod is called Radiance by John Skyrim, featuring a new mace that has a Allied stone, if I said that right, let me know down in the comments, that is slotted into the top of the mace and also the bottom. This mod features 1K textures up to 4K, whichever you choose to download, and for the showcase I am using the 4K version. But before you obtain the Radiance mace, you have to go through a short adventure and quest bringing you to multiple locations. Where the Stendar Shrine is in vanilla, this location isn't added by the mod, and after praying, a ghost will appear guiding you on the quest to the next location and then the next one. This quest does have quest markers, but if you just listen to the dialogue of the ghost that you summon every time that you pray at the shrine, you will easily be able to find the next location. But some of the locations are a little harder to get to than other ones, with the Twin Pillars being the very last location that you have to visit, and after that you'll obtain an item called the Radiating Stone, and then you just have to take it back to the Hall of the Vigilant where everything started. From there is another small quest that takes place with a bunch of dialogue that you have to go through. But of course I won't be spoiling everything about this quest mod, but back to the mace at hand, because this mace is pretty useful. You can toggle the light on and off, but if you equipped it, it will also just turn on automatically. You can also have the option to change the light color with certain buttons. And if you think the light is too bright, you can also go through and change the radius that the light activates. But the most useful feature is that with the mod, you can also change it to a 2-handed warhammer instead of just being a mace. You can only switch it between 2-handed and 1-handed with the weapon unequipped, so you won't be doing it in the middle of combat, though that would make it pretty cool. There's no special added features between the two, well of course besides the damage difference of using a 2-handed versus a 1-handed weapon. And aside from the light changes that this mace comes with, it is technically unenchanted, but it does have a description, and it counts as a silver weapon. So by the time in-game rolls around, this can be the ultimate Daedra killer. Or you can just use it like a lamp and just light up caves if you want to do it that way, but that's pretty boring. This next mod I'm still a little surprised about, but it became one of my favorites. This mod is called Immersive Illusion Spells by J Serpa, who's usually known for making immersive and quest change mods, but I guess a spell pack is also needed once in a while. This mod adds dozens of new illusion spells to the game that all range in utility from just simply tricking enemies to straight up controlling them, which is something I've never seen before. Like the mod Insight, which is Apprentice, it doesn't let you control the NPC, but it does let you get their vision, and it gives you their weaknesses and strengths and pretty much every other stat you can think of. Some of the spells just lets you drain stamina or magicka, whichever one works for you. But the more useful ones like Mirage let you create a clone of yourself that NPCs end up attacking because they can't tell the difference from. And the best part is that it creates 2 of them, so they last quite a while. The stronger version of Mirage lets you create a copy of enemies in a shadow form that actually can damage them instead of it just being a full-on illusion. I guess because you fully break their minds so they believe that they are taking the damage. And as you can see, you can cast multiple at the same time. But the more simple ones, the ones that you will mainly be using in combat, is ones like Tremor, which just makes enemies drop their weapon once you hit them with the spell. It's probably better to cast it before you start fighting, just like the mod Stumble. Honestly, I just use that one for fun. It makes NPCs go flying because I use poise. But like I said, you can go on to full-on controlling NPCs with the spell Mind Control. And the best part about Mind Control is that NPCs don't know you're controlling the NPC. So as soon as you're done attacking, if that NPC gets killed while you're controlling them, no one will know. They also won't magically know where you are. Or you can use on the mod Masquerade, which lets you copy NPCs, or you could turn into one of their allies and just take on an idol. But the main spell that you guys may end up loving is the spell Delirium, which pretty much pacifies all enemies around you, but unlike other spells, they start dancing. Up next, another take on bringing MCO to Magic in Skyrim. This mod is called Inquisitor Warlock, revamping the fire and forget spellcasting of Skyrim and incorporating click to fire spells that are kind of combo based. You can activate this mod by either sneaking twice or using a hotkey that you set in the MCM, and then you're pretty much good to go as long as you have a spell in your hand. This mod pretty much activates on any bolt based spell, and it will have new animations. The continuous stream based magic like flames or frost, they will not have the new animations, but they will have the new special moves that is introduced with this mod. But then again, all the elementals will have the same animations and the new special moves, but different effects on impact because it still follows the vanilla attack damage and damage over time. And once you get to higher levels, what make this mod very useful is the fact that enemies and NPCs or followers can also start to use these spells. So you might find yourself finally getting killed by magic based bosses, rather than just openly cheesing them with the Staff of Magnus, because these can be cast even if out of magicka, but at the cost of something else. No, I was definitely kidding. That would be kind of overpowered if you can cast these without magicka, so I turned on God mode so that I could continuously use these. And the way that you tell that this mode is activated, if you couldn't tell, is the blue streams around your character. You can also now cast a new shield that when you get hit, adds a glowing effect around your character, telling you the amount of hits you've taken, because after a while it will break. But it activates and it's just like Quinn from Witcher. And what I will say about this mod is that I definitely enjoy using it, but it does still seem like it is fairly new in terms of development, like it isn't fully done. Maybe the mod author is done updating it, but from what I've seen, this mod is pretty amazing so far. It's just like I said, a few things could be changed or tweaked just to nerf it a little bit. But based on the downloads of this mod compared to just regular attack animations versus magic, I don't think people really care too much about MCO magic mods, even though this would be revolutionary. Hopefully that changes soon. Up next is the mod Venomancy. You guys kind of recommended I check this mod out, and it took a while, but here we are. And this is basically a complete magic overhaul. Well, not in terms of changing up every other spell in Skyrim, but it adds a completely new category with dozens of spells to complete it, and those being poison and plague spells. And you get the choice. You can either have this mod installed as destruction spells or restoration spells. And because this is the most immersive way for me, I chose restoration. And this mod is massive in scope, adding spells, shouts, items, and even boss encounters that we'll talk about later, with their own unique loot that turn them into Pokemon. And the first part you'll notice is definitely the amount of conjuration spells. There are over 24 conjuration spells. Well over 24, I didn't exactly count, but I can definitely tell. Then you conjure pretty much a poison and plague version of every vanilla creature, and even new ones not even in the base game. Usually taking resources from another mod, and some creatures will be stronger than others because of this, and also factoring in the part that there is tiers, like spell vanilla tiers featuring spells from novice up to expert. And of course the power increasing with every mastery level. So you'll have spells for continuous damage like spray spells similar to flames, as well as new bound weapons. But what's special about these bound weapons is that they do poison damage over time on hit, which in my opinion definitely makes it better than the normal bound weapons, because if you don't use a mod to make them stronger, they just do damage on hit, which kind of make them a little boring, besides the fact that they look like they're on fire. Honestly, while this spell pack, if I can even shrink it down to calling it that, but while this pack does include everything from weapons to destruction or restoration depending on what you installed, and even bosses, which we haven't gotten to, the biggest part in my opinion is definitely the conjuration. Because with this mod you can conjure dozens of creatures and summon tons of bound weapons to overpower enemies with poison. And the best part is that even if you're lacking in just pure damage because you don't have a warrior or you don't prefer to use a party, there's tons of poison effects that you can stack, and some spells even rely on certain enemies already being poisoned with the previous spell before activating the new spell effect that does tons of more damage. Some spells even have a 2-stage effect like this current one that does kind of look grotesque when you first look at it, but it kind of poisons the enemy and does damage over time, and after a while spiders kind of burst from their body. It is definitely disgusting, but it definitely makes it worth it when you consider how much damage you're doing. But of course, besides the grotesque spells, we also have the bosses, which I mentioned a few times before. There are 3 major bosses, but I only showcase 2 here because they are already gross enough and very overpowered. So you definitely want to come prepared for these bosses because they also have their own custom spell. And as I also mentioned before, if you happen to defeat these bosses without closing your game because you died so many times, then you can start to summon them as their own Pokemon, I guess. And I say I guess because you know how when you beat a boss and they're very overpowered, but as soon as you unlock them after beating them, they're kind of just toned down and a little weaker? That's kind of what you get after you beat these bosses, but they're still very worth it in terms of damage and also just because. Up next is a mod that took me a lot longer to review than I thought. This mod is called Runemaster Magic. With this mod, it isn't like a normal spell. Now you have to craft runes that will let you enchant weapons. The enchantments do wear off though. They will either be a one-use spell that activates on hit of enemies or lasts for a short duration of usually 30 seconds. The animated enchantment will apply to all weapons when you enchant them with the rune, but if you have an ebony weapon, it will never wear off and it will permanently enchant the weapon. But between the wards, there is the Arcane ward, or besides that one, there's the Tenebrous, which basically have no difference besides the effect of the spell. And once you activate it, you'll have a new animated effect, and every time you hit enemies, like I said, it will either last for 30 seconds until the enchantment wears off, or maybe it is a single use hit spell. Like the Havoc spell causes a single explosion when you enchant the weapon and hit enemies. But I do want to point out crafting runes does take soul gems, so it can be a little complicated, but about 1 rune per common soul gem and 4 runes for grand or black soul gems. And depending on the strength of the power, it will use more rune. These spells work more like powers than cast spells. You activate it with your weapon out, and while your weapon is enchanted, you cannot use any other spells until you finish using the current one, by either waiting for the timer to end or attacking something and casting that spell on purpose. These spells all have their own usefulness, all causing some form of damage though. None of them is purely utility, but some are AoE attacks while some focus more on just one person. Like Sundering Inferno. It's a large fire explosion that does a lot of initial damage, but then does take fire damage the longer enemies are within its range. And this mod does require a lot of runes, but it does work great, or you can pull out the Umbral Veil, which pretty much does the same but in a Tenebrous version. This one, however, does not explode for initial damage, but it does last longer where you put it. And this mod also has a power for bows. If you enchant the bow, you'll have the Almighty Bow, which can shoot enemies and then explode over time, and also hurt multiple enemies nearby. I do want to point out, if you can enchant ebony weapons permanently, it'll just work on cooldown based, so you won't be able to spam these. And that was it for today, guys. Like I said, this was the top 10 magic mods of 2025 so far. But like I said, this wasn't ranked from best to worst or worst to best between the top 10, but more so which ones I had more fun with and which could basically change up the game easier for you. So if you enjoyed, hit that like button down below. Peace and love, guys.